get writing author reads. So yes, you're in for a treat. Kevin is going to read from his latest book, Two For The Tablelands, featuring Sebastian Synard. Did I get it right this time?
Good. Yeah, that's good.
Kevin, maybe you want to just talk about this excerpt you're going to read and why you selected it.
Okay. Well, it's fairly close to the beginning of the book, and it's actually the kind of the pivotal moment in the beginning of the story. It's the actually discovery of the victim itself, and it takes place on the Tablelands, that iconic structure in Grossmore National Park that's world famous. And I thought, what a better place to pick as a site for a murder than the Tablelands.
Oh, well, take it away, Kevin, and you have our attention.
Okay, well, Sebastian is gone with his son, whose name is Nick. Nick is let's see, 13 now, almost 14. And they've been hiking for a couple of days. And this is as they're coming down from the Tablelands, the height of the Tablelands. And they have a view over beautiful Bond Bay to begin. The view over Bond Bay is brilliant. It's one of the most beautiful small bays in Newfoundland. Several communities trail its shoreline, and in the distance beyond them is Gros Morne, the mountain challenged and conquered 2 days ago. It does a father and his son good to sit among the peridot and take in the mighty geological forces at play on this earth of ours. Here we are perched atop a profound seismic event, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, yet in the grand scheme we're mere specks in time and place. And to think that we're drifting apart from Eurasia still at the rate of 2.5 centimeters a year. Anything left to eat? The endless gut sharpens reality. The view before us apparently a limited distraction. The salt and preservative-ridden beef jerky has long disappeared, as had the granola bars. I'm afraid we're down to the dried fruit and raw veg department, figs and carrot sticks, which elicit an audible groan. I offer up 5 minutes of phone time as compensation. It's like manna from heaven. Good God, it's as if I had unwrapped a Mars bar and presented it to him on a silver platter. There's got to be an academic paper in this somewhere. A scientific comparison between cell phone usage and teenage food consumption. Could be the iPhone denial diet. Has a certain ring to it. The descent is less taxing than the ascent, but navigating the uneven rock and loose gravel with legs not as quick-witted as they once were makes for something less than a piece of cake. Better safe than a twisted ankle. Of course, young Bucky is well ahead. Likely he's been dodging over the rocks and texting at the same time. He cuts across the stream well ahead of me, and when I reach the spot where we had stopped on the way up, he's sitting there, his sweatshirt off in anticipation that we'll make good on our plan to cool off in the shallow pool. It means easing our way down several meters up a rocky embankment, not particularly steep, but a bit tricky. Not that the cloven-hoofed among us have any problem. Nick has rid himself of his footwear, and by the time I catch up, the pool is sun-glinting and fresh, totally inviting. Neither of us anticipated a need to bring swim trunks. We look around as we scale down to our boxers. There's been no one in sight for ages. Nick strikes a foot in the water and quickly recoils. Damn, man, I don't know about this. There's only one way in, Nick, which means a deep intake of air, an ungainly scruff over the rocks, and a horizontal lunge into the deeper part. cold as hell and capable of shriveling cast iron. He knows I'll pulverize him with water, so better get it over with. Nick plunges in and shoots back up all in one motion, screeching with everything his lungs can hold. Holy shit. He stays all of 10 seconds. Deed done, point made. He's back on shore, rubbing himself down with a sweatshirt. Then off he hobbles, a goose flesh stick of a kid. Blundstones and board shorts in hand to find some place halfway secluded. I'm afraid I'm not quite so modest. There's a lot to be said for standing unabashedly naked on rocks from the earth's mantle, even if it's only for a few seconds until I get back into hiking shorts. There's a certain cosmic karma to it, something primal, man transcending time and fashion. All that suddenly pitched aside. Dad! Laced in terror. Holy, I'm coming! He's injured, sounding worse than that. I force my way into my hiking boots, knowing I'll never be able to run over the rocks without them. I find him standing motionless, unhurt, thank God, dressed, his hair askew, his faded t-shirt clinging to him where he hasn't completely dried himself. Nick, what's... His hand clenches my arm. Oh, God. I force his head into my chest. In front of us, mostly under rock, is a body, its throat slashed, hideous, and for the first few seconds, incomprehensible. The poor bugger's face is covered, but not his throat. That is thrown back at an angle that widens the gash obscenely. The edges have constricted in the sun, the flesh surrounding it caked with blood dried to earth red. Hardly any contrast to the shadowed, rusted color of the rocks. So little difference between the color of the rocks and the color of the dead man's skin that Nick had stepped on the leg before he saw the severed throat. Whoever had piled on the rocks must have run off before the job was done, leaving in view a section of the other thigh, an arm, and crudely confirming it to be a man, an unpulverized top half of his penis. Cringe and groan, not something man or boy needs to see in his lifetime, makes a fellow think twice about exposing his own boxered member on the tablelands ever again. Arm around his shoulder, I steer Nick away from the scene. He's shaking still. 911. A cop gets back to me, then someone from Parks Canada to establish where we are exactly. I bolster Nick back up the incline all the way, trying to talk him down from his shock. There's a boulder big enough to seat both of us, from where we're able to sight the cops as they make their way in our direction. You okay? He nods unconvincingly. Gross, he says. The all-encompassing word. I'm thinking he's seen worse in movies, on the internet, painful to witness, oddly reassuring that the real thing unsettles him a bit too much. He starts to cry and is shaking more than ever. I dig out the wind bottom of my backpack and give it to him. Far too big, of course, the sleeves ending past his hands. He settles against my chest, trying to control his sobs, wiping his nose in the sleeve of the jacket. Now again, very much the kid. It's okay, Nick. I hold his head to me and lean my cheek into the top of it. I was 30 before I saw a dead person, and that was an aunt who looked better in her casket than she did in real life. What Nick saw will stick with him for a long time, and I'll hold him for all I'm worth when he needs it, and together we'll get him through this. That's what fathers are supposed to be good at. So that's the last few pages of the first chapter of Two for the Tablelands.
Ah, I'm back. Wow, you did a great job reading that, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Is that part of your? I've really enjoyed it. Now you've got me wanting to read the book again, and I finished it not that long ago. And I was telling you that I loved, like, and I used to mark in it particular sentences, and I don't know if that upset you that I did that in your book.
No, it's your book. We
But
paid for it or we're giving it, so that's good.
Yeah, and it's just that sometimes I really appreciate dialect and things like that, and I just want to go back and just zone in on those particular things, and then that just makes it easier.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you should say that, because I think actually dialogue is something that comes easier to, and dialect, because I often write in dialect, easier for me than other parts of writing. I kind of can visualize the back and forth of people's conversations, and I enjoy that. And I think both the books, and in the third one as well, are very kind of conversational in tone. You get the sense that Sebastian is talking to you, and the way he's chattering on and going nowhere sometimes, but trying to make the most of what he's saying.
Yeah, and I did say dialect, but what I was meaning, and dialect, yes, is interesting to look at, but dialogue, one of my favorite things in a book is dialogue, that interchange. And he's so witty at times, and he just gets in these situations. It's just kind of fun. He says some good things. Kevin, when you're writing, do you read your work out loud? A lot of people do read their own work. Is that something you do?
I sometimes do, yeah. If and I tell writers that how they say, how do I fine tune what I've written? And I said, one thing you can do is to read it out loud, and because I find reading out loud sometimes, if there's a problem with a sentence, it's much more identifiable if you hear it trying to be said than if you're actually reading it. And so if something is not working for me in particular, then I'll attempt to read it out loud and see if there's a way to reconfigure a sentence to make it flow a bit better, because flow is very important, I think, in a book. Yeah.
And do you I don't know if the word is like labor, like say if you've written a chapter and then the next day, or written a segment, the next day you go back, do you rework it then, or do you kind of leave it right to the end and go back? What's your methodology?
I generally, first thing I do in the morning when I'm starting in again is reread, say, the 2 pages from the day before, and I'll spend some time, maybe even up to an hour, reworking that and making it flow. I can see right away if there's some problem. That's one stage. And eventually I'll do that that process and work to the end, as I finished off the first draft of this new book the other day. And now I'm in the process of going through page by page. I'm maybe up to 30 or 40 pages right now, and improving it, making it flow better. In this case, because some of the characters that were introduced in the beginning of the book developed in a way that I hadn't really thought of at the time, I also had to rework a bit of their thought processes, so they're more in line with what they'll eventually become. So one person that I introduced turns out to have been part of the crime scene, but we don't know that when we see him first. So, but he does, obviously. So then I had to take that into account. Yeah, but reading it aloud helps. And then, of course, the book is fine at this point, and I'll reach a point, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, that I'll feel comfortable sending it to the publisher and to the editor that I'll be working with. And so she'll read it, and she'll come back to me with maybe a whole list of things. She'll make, annotations in the text and send that back to me so I can read what she's thinking. Sometimes it'll just be grammatical errors, but more often than not, she'll say, well, I think we need to know a little bit more about this character at this point, or you think that's really in keeping with what Sebastian is like as a character, or you and things like, you mentioned this at the beginning, but you haven't really tied it up at the end. You're leaving the reader kind of hanging. So, we need to deal with that in some way. So, there's a long process working with the editor. So that'll be working. I'll be working with that over a few months.
Mm.
The book is. Go ahead.
No, actually, what you're going to say is probably more important. You continue.
Well, just that, the book is due out sometime this fall, so we have a little bit of time to to work with. The last one, the timeline was a bit more condensed because I really didn't get to the editor till maybe 2 months before the book was due to go to the printer. So this time we have a little bit more time to work with.
And Kevin, even with all your experience, you still work quite a bit with an editor. You're
Yeah.
That's interesting to hear, because sometimes we think, he would just write a book and it would be
Well,
perfect.
absolutely not. In fact, I don't know if you've had experience, but sometimes I read books and say, oh, I think this could have done with a good editor, because there's extraneous material in here that really don't have relevance to the story. I'm sorry. And, a good editor would have pointed that out. I think some writers maybe get to the point of their career and thinking they don't really need an editor. I published, 15 books, so who's to tell me what to write? Mm-hmm. But, the editor brings that external perspective, a fresh eye, and I value that tremendously. Yeah.
Wonderful. And it's nice to hear you say that. And just one final question I really wanted to ask you. Have you ever dealt with writer's block ever in your career?
Not for any extended period, I have to say. I have started books that I've never finished, but I haven't been very far into them before I discovered it's really not the book I need to be writing at this point in time. I might go back to it eventually, but other times I'm thinking, no, this is not really going to be worth my effort, and I don't think it's going to be a great book in the end if I do get through it. So if it becomes a bit of a struggle, then to me that's a sign that it's not something that I maybe should be doing. I've found over the years that the books that came to me most easily are the books that have found the widest audience, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. So you were in alignment with it. What came out of you probably flew. There was a flow. I guess you were in the flow with that sort of thing. But that's really interesting, because we often just see the end product and we forget all the work that goes into it. And it's so great that readers out there can just enjoy your work, and they can get it very easily, right, Kevin? They can go on Amazon. They can.
It's available in all the online stores and physical stores as well, and in ebook form as well as the physical print form.
And we want to encourage them to do that, because writers write to be read. And this is your webpage, kevinmajor.ca. Mm-hmm. And I guess they can find out more about you there. And I will put in the comments here as well a link to your webpage and your biography. Well, I think we've come to the end of our time together.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. This has been great.
Oh, I have too. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it. And I hope that we can do it again sometime. And maybe when you get that next book, that'd be really fun. Okay. And perhaps a cup of coffee if I ever again get to St. John's. Or a dram of the wee whiskey, is it? Or scotch, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah, a scotch, a very smoky, peaty scotch. So that'll be something that you'll remember.
I'll remember that. Again, thank you so much, Kevin.
Okay, take care.
Have a wonderful